Welcome to Bass Fishing for Noobs on the Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Milford. And today we have the host of the Kayak Angler podcast, co host of Hooked on Wild Waters podcast, Ken Morris. Welcome to the podcast, Ken.
Thanks, Ryan. It's cool to be here. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Um, I invited Ken on here. I just wanted to get some of his fall bass fishing techniques and, some stuff he likes to do. He likes and stuff. I've been doing a lot of river fishing here lately. I know a few listeners, even other guys here on Paddle and Fin that like to fish rivers a lot. I feel like we can get pretty good knowledge out of Ken here.
Yeah, I do like rivers a lot, so it's
let's just start like one of your.
It's one of the what? Sorry, it was really garbled.
Yeah, I think you broke up for a second. I don't think I heard what you were starting to say.
What was the question again?
Oh, I was just gonna say, what? Just to start it off, like, what's one of your favorite bass fishing techniques for the fall?
Well, I'm gonna have to preface that with my favorite time for the fall is like early fall. I think a little bit of the summer transition into fall, because my favorite technique is for river fishing has got to be topwater, anything topwater, because the smallmouth just hit lures so hard when they hit. And I've had a lot of success with topwater fishing late summer, early fall. So like when they're transitioning a little bit from that, from those those very, very hot days into those slightly cooler days before it really drops off, at least here in Ohio and some of the waters in the north, that topwater bite just really turns on hard for smallmouth, and there's just it's almost indescribable. So it's like a cannonball that hits that water sometimes, how hard they hit. So, I mean, it's really kind of anything that's a disturbance. Buzz bait, whopper plopper, walking bait. I've hit them on all of it. So it's really, once you find that topwater bite during that time, it's really on. And then I guess transitioning into what you would call a more traditional fall bite, at least in my region, is a moving bait. Like I had a lot of success a couple weeks ago with the new Z-Man diesel minnow, spinner baits, hard body swim baits, stuff like that, seem to turn on really well when the water temp really drops and they kind of leave the top water bite alone and move into like a moving bait, a reaction bait, because they're putting on that fall feed a little bit. So they're still eating big minnows and stuff like that. It's just that they're keeping it a little bit more subsurface, almost like a wake bait to a swim bait versus being all the way on top, if that makes any sense. In my experience, anyway. Does that lag out?
Yeah.
Yeah, lag out a little bit. Yeah. I don't know what's up with the connection. I don't know.
It's me. I was talking about this with the other guys from Paddle and Fin right before we did this. I've got really good connection in the house, but I can't do the podcast in the house because I'd have so much background noise. So I come out to the shed, and where I do have like 200 and something download speed inside, out here I got like 10.
Yeah. But the delay kind of doesn't help a little bit. But yeah, so basically a quick review of what I said was like when you're transitioning from summer into fall, I really like a topwater bite, but when it transitions to more of a fall bite, like the water temps start to drop and they start to ignore the topwater, it goes more into like a wake bait reaction swimming bait bite. So like swim baits, spinner baits, stuff like that, like more of a reaction than a topwater, if that makes sense, like a sub-level reaction bite. Not quite finesse at that point yet. They're still eating pretty heavy. I think the big key, though, to figuring out a fall bite is really understanding your region, where you're at, because fall's such a bland term. It really is dependent on your environment, because like obviously winter in Cleveland, Ohio is much, much different than winter in anywhere in Florida. So, and anywhere in between. So I think the temperatures of the water, how they change their patterns due to the temperatures of the water and the air and how much oxygen are in the streams and that sort of stuff. I think all of that plays a huge part into what happens to the bite, and you have to adjust to that to your region. Like, for example, like I was saying, late summer, early fall, that kind of starts in like September for us up here, and at least in Ohio, in like my opinion. Like the bite, like what I would do midsummer changes in like September, and then closer to October is when it's going to transition into more of the swim bait approach to me than anywhere else. Whereas like basically my fall bite in October could be somebody's winter bite in Georgia or Florida or one of the Carolinas or something like that. It's all just, because they cycle, the fish cycle differently depending on their environment. So it's really, it's hard to have a blank statement of what a good fall bite is unless you're talking about a specific region or area, in my opinion, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I went out yesterday and, I was thinking, we should be in the fall bite. I'm in Middle Tennessee, and the high was, I think when I got on the water, the air temperature was like low 30s or something like that, maybe mid 30s. And the high for yesterday was like 50 something. And I'm not sure of the water temp. I don't have a depth finder that tells me water temp on it, unfortunately. But man, I got skunked yesterday, and that's the first time I've been skunked in a while. And like I was going out there thinking like, okay, we should be in the fall bite. I'm about to catch me some fish. So I was really disappointed with that. So
yeah, the winter, like the fall wintry sort of, can definitely put some merit on you. It can definitely remind you of what a skunk is like, because it can be really touchy. Once you find them, you can find them, but if you're having a hard time finding them, it's, it can definitely be a real challenge, because it's just not, you just don't get the little fish bite. If you're going to catch a fish right now, it's probably going to be a decent fish, just because of the amount of energy that they want to use to go after food, because their metabolism's slowing down, because it's, it's colder, the water's colder and stuff like that. I don't know. To be completely honest, like fall into winter fishing is like, well, it's not so much fall, but like late fall, winter into spring fishing is probably my least favorite time. I know you can catch some really big fish during that time. It really tests my patience, and I haven't put enough time into it to like really feel comfortable doing it. It's just one of those, it's like that's the time for me where like I kind of like hibernate from fishing for a bit. I'll go out for steelhead every once in a while since they're up here, but it's definitely a tougher situation for me, whereas a lot of people really, really like to get going right now in some of those southern states that are a little bit warmer, that keep that water going. So I think in Middle Tennessee for you, it's probably closer to my end where things are really starting to slow down, but it doesn't mean they're not there and they can't bite. You may have just been not quite at the right place at the right time, sort of thing. With the waters cooling down like that, I would go towards deeper pools, and maybe ones that are bumped up right after riffles and not necessarily in the riffles. Like if there's a ledge or something that has moving water where it's circulating oxygen into those pools that are right after it, my first attempt, and this could be way off, but my first attempt would be to like slow roll like a swim bait or something to crawl across the bottom very, very slowly, not like burn it, like kind of bump the bottom and creep it along to see how it goes, to try to find them sitting down, because they're still going to eat off of that conveyor belt that's running that current down, but they don't want to use as much energy, or they don't have as much expendable energy because they're trying to save it up because it's cooler weather. So I would still run that current seam off of like the riffles, but into a deeper hole, because the deeper hole you're going to find they're going to stack up on each other and kind of wolf pack. At least smallmouth will. I don't know if you have do you have smallmouth where you're fishing, Ryan? Is that what you're going after for the most part?
For the most part, with me, it's largemouth.
Okay.
I know we got smallmouth around here. I've only found one ever so far, but a lot of people talk about smallmouth that they've caught.
Yeah.
I guess I target more largemouth
Gotcha.
areas by default.
Gotcha. And that's just a different, that's a different perspective too, because if depending on what type of fish you're going for, type of bass you're going for, can completely change your approach. Now, if I were going for largemouth at this time, and this is a little bit more based on like a lake or a pond or something like that, more flat water, but I think the principle still stays the same. Is the largemouth they're going to be less aggressive than the smallmouth. So this is really the time where you pick up like a jig or a Texas rig or something like that, but you're not flipping into reaction bites. You're working at much slower and more precise spots that that you're not even going to feel the bite. Like they're going to pick it up and then it's going to seem heavy, and you're going to miss a lot of fish because you don't even know that the fish was on there. Like they're really cold and they really slow down. The largemouth do big time. Like the difference between a cold water largemouth bite and a cold water smallmouth bite is just insane, because the smallmouth will stay a little bit more active, in my opinion, whereas like the largemouth are just going to be like a little soft thump, and just like you don't even know you have them on almost. If that makes sense.
So, would you say you'd need like a really sensitive, or like I guess you say a really sensitive rod for that?
I don't, not necessarily. I mean, it really depends on your setup completely, because a sensitive rod is going to definitely give you a little bit more of a feel, but it also depends on the line that you're using. Like, because if you're using braid, you're going to feel anything anyway, depending on how you're holding the reel or what you're using. But a lot of guys don't like to use braid because it depends on how pressured their areas are. It could be line shy. I think Drew's talked about it in our podcast, or in the podcast Hooked on Wild Waters. Him and I have discussed his, all braid sort of approach, and I'm very similar to that. Whereas I don't find as much lie shyness in my style of fishing and where I fish, but that sensitivity in the rod is going to be more needed for a heavier mono or fluorocarbon, because it doesn't run those vibrations up as quickly as that braided line is. So it's really going to, unfortunately, there isn't one answer to that. It's how you set your combo up and how you're fishing. Are you using the monofilament with a more sensitive rod, or are you you still like power fishing with braid and just yanking them out of there? And it's just, I don't know, like I'm still developing this fall and like winter fishing stuff myself. So it's hard to give like I guess a knowledgeable answer on that, as much as it is like you guys are kind of getting an open door of how I'm thinking about it, figuring out this past couple of years of getting into fishing further into the season where the water gets colder. If that makes sense.
Okay. But to kind of go off that, the setup that I'm using for jigs right now, it's a 7-foot medium heavy rod. I'm running straight fluoro, 20-pound fluoro on it right now. I do plan on, I haven't done it yet because I plan on changing out some reels in the spring, and so I didn't want to waste the line doing it now. But I do plan on doing like braid to a fluoro leader.
To a leader, yeah.
Yeah. So, I just, go ahead.
Oh no, it's hard to say, because like I'm still experimenting with a lot of stuff too. I know I've been fishing out of the kayaks now for like 4 years or so, and it still feels like I'm brand new. I'm not gonna act like I'm the crazy expert or anything, but I went through that stage of where I was tying leaders to my braid, and it helped. It helped in that transition of when I was learning of what a bite felt like, and I felt like it was not creating the line shy when I wasn't exactly making them bite like I do sort of now. I feel like I make them bite now, like when I tie a flipping, like a like a Texas rig style with a tungsten weight on top. When I'm pitching those into lily pads and reeds and stuff like that, and more of a summer, or actually almost all year long, I'm like putting it in front of their face and I'm making them make a decision. Either eat it or don't, and I'm going to move on because I'm fishing very fast. Flip it in there, bang, bang, bite, no bite, move on to the next spot, sort of thing. Whereas before, when I was tying those leaders and stuff on, I would be throwing stuff like Cincos, and I did have some like jigs and some different like Texas rig stuff, but I felt like I felt like it was more approachable to the fish because of the clearer lines and stuff like that. But my problem was my connections. My leader connection knots weren't great. One, I wasn't able to tie them very small because I didn't practice very much, and I just waited till the last minute and rigged everything up. And the knots would catch in my eyelets, and they would slow down at like how I would cast, and they would catch in my eyelets, and they would just cause me problems. And then really, if I were to break one off when I set the hook, it was always at that connection point, and it was never consistent. I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I finally got to the point where I just started tying straight braid, and I didn't really lose that much success on it at that point because I had figured the technique out, I guess. And but I see a point to the leaders. I really do. I still tie leaders like that for my finesse rods. Like I'll do braid on like a Ned rig or something like that, and then I'll do a fluoro leader for those. But when it comes to like the big baits, I guess I throw like the flipping or the top water stuff like that. Like I kind of cut the leaders out of the equation for myself. But the leaders can work. It's definitely something not to ignore, for sure. And it saves you a bit of money too in the long run. Because if you're tying leaders to your braid and you're trying to be economical, you can use that braid forever and just keep retying leaders to the front of it.
That's one of the reasons why I'm wanting to do it, is to kind of save money like that. Because I fish on a tight budget, so
Exactly.
I gotta save money where I can.
I feel you, man. And like, that's another thing is, I don't know, people listen to this can tear me up all they want. I don't really care if I say something wrong or something they think that is stupid from, their perspective. But
we got good listeners. They're pretty friendly.
Yeah. But, that's something that, an angle that I've come out of too. Like, I have to be very economical in my approach to this. And a lot of people would say that could see, like, maybe think differently because I have 3 kayaks now, and I'm on the Jackson fishing team and all this stuff. Like, but I literally don't have any other sponsors other than that. Have to pay for, like, I have a little help with some stuff, but it's not anything that, like, it's free. And you see guys going out with 12 rods at a time on their kayaks, and they're going fishing. They have 6 to 12 or 8, 12 setups, stuff like that. I generally take out 3 rods. Like I have 3 rods, and I probably own 6 combos. Like and that's a lot for me because I started off with only having 2. So being able to be economical and get the most out of your money for the equipment that you buy, because maybe you only have $200 or $300 to put into your combos. So that's rod, reel, and line, $200. You got to figure it out and have a good time fishing. So I think that's a great way to save money, is if you can put that braid on your line and you're wanting to use those leaders, you can use that braid for 2 seasons. I don't see why you couldn't. I did it. I never really had an issue. Where I'm starting to have to change out my braid now is because I stopped using those leaders. And when I change lures and cut down, then I lose the length in my spool. And when my spool gets too low, that's when I got to reline. So it's definitely, that is one of the tricks to be able to extend the life of the equipment that you buy.
You were saying $200 or $300 for, like, to put into your combos and stuff. It's funny because I fish on such a budget. I just recently got a $50 lose rod from Walmart, and I put a used reel that I paid $20 on, and that's the most I have invested in any of my combos.
Hey, man, it gets the job done, though. It gets the job done.
But I do have, more expensive retail combos,
Yeah.
but like everything I've got is like getting a good deal. Like my top water rod,
Mm-hmm.
a buddy of mine, he had a Daiwa reel bait caster that he paid like $100 or something like that for it. Didn't like it. Only used it a couple times. Didn't like it. Sold it to me for $25. I've got it on a ducket rod that retails for like $150, and I got that because I make my own football head jigs, and I made a bunch for my wife's uncle, and he won this in a raffle at a boat tournament one time.
Yeah.
He decided he didn't need it, and since I gave him a bunch of jigs, he's like, "Here, you want this rod?" And just gave it to me. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Like,
yeah, I mean, I can't. I'm trying to say the right thing. So most of the rods that I'm using now, I actually won. I either won them in charity raffles or I won them as prizes through the River Bass Tournament Trail years ago when I was competing in those. I mean, I started off with ugly sticks. I used ugly sticks. They're $50 rods, and I taught myself how to use a bait caster with it was an ugly stick combo. It was a Shakespeare bait caster on a medium heavy ugly stick, and
sounds terrible.
It was awful, and I taught myself how to throw a bait caster with it, and I learned how to fish with it, and I put frogs on it, and I put Texas rigs on it, and I changed it out, and I kept fishing different. I'd put spitter baits on it. I'd fish everything with the same rod. I just had to retie everything, and then I got lucky and won a rod, and then I bought a better reel for it because I won a better rod, and then I won some more rods, and then I was like, I need to try some of these better reels, because then like after a year that Shakespeare reel like was breaking down like bad because it was cheap. It wasn't going to last more than, as much as I was fishing, it wasn't going to last very long at that point. So then I got into some of the higher end gear, which extends the life a couple of extra years, depending on how much you go out. So it was kind of a progressive thing. And I was very, very lucky and to be able to win some stuff to really get it going. But if I hadn't had that success in some of those tournaments, like I'd still only have 3 rods, and most of it would be $20 to $50 individual pieces, and that's where I got that 200 number. I wasn't talking about $200 on your reel, $200 on your rod. I was talking $200 total. Like you getting the rod, the reel, the line, and after tax, you spent $200. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely rough, and that's then you got lures that you keep losing that you have to replace. So it definitely can be rough out there.
Yeah, that's one good thing about a kayak is I haven't lost too many lures since I've been fishing in a kayak, because you can usually get right over there and get them out for the most part.
Retrieval rate is much higher in the kayak. I have to agree with that.
Which I guess that's also might well, I guess I was gonna say it might depend on whether you got a pedal drive or not, but I guess you can pull that pedal drive up to get over where you need to go. I haven't gotten in a pedal drive yet, but
yeah, it's changed the way I fish. It really has. Because being a predominantly is really, I guess I do call myself a predominant river guy now, but I didn't start on rivers. I started on lakes, and I had a sit-in kayak, and I went to a local, some local places here in Cleveland just to like learn it. And then like within like 2 or 3 weeks, I found a tournament in Pinewood over with the kayak angler guys. And I went to it, and then that kind of like that's where it all started, like opening up the world of what all this could be or could do. And then I fell in love with the tournaments after that first one, and then I found the river bass and stuff, and I went down to Columbus to try one of those, and they were like, it's a river tournament. And I was like, I was terrified. I was like, I've never been on a river before. I don't know how to fit. Are there fish in rivers? Like, are there bass in rivers? Like, I was pretty dumb about the whole situation. And slowly but surely, I met my buddy Clayton, and we got it, and he got me into river fishing, and then it kind of just like took off. Like, and that's where I just left lakes behind and went really headfirst into this river thing, searching for smallmouth and going down to South Carolina and catching largemouth and big largemouth in their rivers and stuff like that. And then it came back where I had the opportunity, and I still fish lake tournaments and stuff. I just wasn't efficient at them. And I would do okay, finish middle of the pack, maybe higher, had a couple top tens, but nothing that was too impressive, I guess, and in what I would say in a finish in a local tournament and stuff like that. But I was always exhausted. I was always way more tired after fishing a lake than I was a river, because most of the time I was going downriver using the current and doing float trips and stuff like that. But then I got into a Jackson Coosa FD when it came out, and like at first I was like, I'm always going to paddle. I really like paddling. That's the whole point. Like I was kind of an anti-pedal for like, I think on the inside, I never come out and say that, but I was kind of like in the inside, I was like, nah, who needs that sort of thing? And then I got in one and I started using it and fishing with it and figuring out that like it really is a supreme advantage for your body, because using your legs to get around all day leaves your upper body fresh to make that extra 5 casts, to make those extra 25 casts, to be not exhausted when you get to your spot, to be focused right away, to start fishing and pitching, and your casts aren't off because you're not tired, like you're actually pinpoint casting where you want to be, because you just didn't paddle a mile across the lake, you pedaled, and your legs, now you're just sitting there, or you stand up and that body's now resting, that part of your body's now resting, and you're using your upper body to fish. So like the body efficiency between a pedal drive and a paddle kayak is just insane. And that's where the advantage comes from in my mind, is just the efficiency of how you use your human power to get around. And that's what really has, I really credit that Coosa FD to helping me learn how to fish lakes better, because I can check out the spots, go fish, hit new ones, and efficiently do it without getting exhausted.
Yeah, I love the idea of a pedal drive. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to upgrade to a pedal drive in the spring. But man, I love the idea of it. Like mainly being able to hold my spot while on a lake, so I can fish. I know a bunch of us here at Paddle and Fin met up at Dale Hollow about a month ago, a little over a month ago.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Jay Randall went down there, right?
Yeah, Jay was down there, and man, I was just getting tossed around left and right, but between the wind and the wake from the boats, man, I was getting tossed around everywhere. And Jay and Josh Eldridge, they're in pedal drives, and they're just sitting there holding their spot, and I'm trying to figure out how I can knock them off their boat so I can see. But yeah, I forgot that you were a Jackson guy. I probably shouldn't have brought you on here. Now, all these Jackson guys we got on Paddle and Fin are probably going to try to get you to do another segment on here. It seems like every time we have a Jackson guy on here, they want to make them another host of a different segment.
Yeah, it's all good. I'll just I think I'll be a guest. It's pretty cool what you guys are doing though. I'll let those guys have their fun. I like Dustin. I met him. He's the newest host, right? Dustin Nichols at the Saltwater. Saltwater segment. Yeah, I met him in Florida in September. He's a really, really good dude. He's very knowledgeable, and he let me follow him around in the saltwater a bit. So he taught me a lot in those 2 days that we were able to fish together, and he's got a lot of knowledge. So that's going to be a really exciting segment too for your guys' listeners to pick up on. He's definitely a good dude. And he knows a lot about those redfish. So that's definitely a good pickup there.
Yeah, but we're really excited about that. I know a lot of us. I don't know if many of us at all have tried saltwater fishing, so I think there's a lot of knowledge to be gained out of that. But we got him, and we got Daniel Perry. He's coming on the Friday episodes of Reel Down, do the tournament recaps. So that's a bunch of changes going on here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't say it enough. A shout out to him, because when we were down, like I said, in Florida for fishing out of some of our new Jacksons that we got, I basically kind of defaulted to him. He kind of took me under his wing a little bit, and I just followed him around all day in the and the salt just kind of kept my distance about 20, 30 feet and watched what he was doing and just kind of observed and cat tried to mimic it and casting similarly. And he put me on my first lake trout, or not lake trout, my first sea trout, and like speckled trout. And then I caught many more in those 2 days. Like I probably caught 6 or 7 of them. Never really got into any reds, but it's how it goes sometimes. But he definitely took me from being not knowledgeable to having some confidence going out there. So I think I'm excited to see what he comes up with that segment for sure.
Yeah, cool. And I read your article about, you talked a little bit about going down to Florida and you catching your first, I don't even know how you, is it Swanee bass?
Yeah, the Swanee bass. Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool too. The whole point of the trip was to try out our new kayaks that we ordered, and they're the new lines of the year. So we had the U-Picks and the Kilroy HDs out there. So I got a U-Pick and the new Dorado, or not the new, but the Dorado collar, the green one. And I think Dustin was in the HD, the Kilroy HD, and it was a very unique attempt to be able, like a very unique time to be able to try to go after some fish in Florida. We were at some very, very cool spots that aren't super well known, and to be able to go after largemouth in Florida is one thing. And we were fishing with Jean Wilson, so there was there's big fish around wherever she's going. So it was really, really cool experience. It was awesome to meet her. She's a great person. The positivity is just overflowing, and I can't say enough nice things about her. And the ability to take us fishing down there, so I never felt like there wasn't a chance for me to catch a 6, 7, 8, 9 pound bass. The water just was amazing. And it's not a bad secondary to be able to scratch another species off your list. So I'm now up to 4 different bass species that I've caught out of the black bass species that are in the United States. So I have a couple more on target now, but I was able to catch one of those. And I kind of pointed out in the article a little bit, you don't hear much about the Swanee bass because they don't get big. The state record was I think it was under 3 pounds or something like that, or maybe under 4 pounds. I'd have to look it back up, but
yeah, I think it was 3-point-something pounds.
Yeah,
from what I remember reading.
Yeah, it's not big at all. They just don't grow that big, but they got these beautiful red eyes, and they're very aggressive little fish. And for as big as that was, if you saw the pictures, or if you guys look up the article and find the pictures, that little thing hit a 5-inch swim bait. So I mean, it's not like they're not aggressive and they're not fun to catch. So it was just a really, really cool thing. It's hard to put in perspective being able to catch something so unique because you're just not in the area. People in Florida probably take it for granted some, and whereas Lake Erie for me, I take for granted all the time. I could be on Lake Erie in 15 minutes and I don't fish it because I drive around and fish rivers that are much, much farther away than my house. So, people would love to be able to get out for walleye and smallmouth at the same time, whatever, or steelhead even, but it's just, I don't know, something's wrong with me and I like to drive far away from home to go fishing. But yeah, it's a super, super fun trip, and definitely recommend going after some of those little guys just to see how cool they are with their patterns and their different eyes. And they got the tongue patch similar to a spotwood and stuff like that. So I had a lot of fun testing out those new kayaks and going after those fish that I don't normally get a chance to chase.
I mean, just going off the whole, catching something you ain't used to thing, I just a few months ago, I caught my first rock bass, And I thought that was the coolest thing. Like this thing looks
Those,
so weird.
yeah, those things hit
And
hard too, especially if you're fishing like a Ned rig. And they hit, and you think you have a smallmouth on sometimes. So you're like, this isn't a good one, but I got it. I got potentially a measurable fish, like in the sense of a tournament. I potentially got something that could add to my limit, and then you're like, oh, rock bass. Like you get to that point. But the first time you catch them, they're really, really cool fish, and they're a lot of fun to catch. Like if you're just out fun fishing, like it's definitely better than getting a skunk. So those are definitely a cool little fish. The biggest disappointment fish that I think is underrated a lot in the area are drum, the white drum, like they call them sheephead in the area. You hate catching them on tournament day, but I honestly never mind catching one when I'm out fun fishing because they're just so strong and they put up such a big fight. And they stink and they're slimy or whatever, but I think it reminds me of when I went to St. Clair for a KBF tournament, and I had been struggling all day long. Wasn't able to really pick up fish, and I knew other people around me were picking up smallmouth, so I was in the right area. I just was doing something not correct, and I finally figured something out, and I got 2 smallmouth in a row, and I was like, all right, I'm on to something. Like I can at least try to put a limit up and not look like a complete dummy out here. And within 5 minutes, I picked up 2 smallmouth. So I was on a roll. I was feeling it. And not even 3 minutes later, I start to do the same thing. And in 2 seconds, crack, crack, wham, my rod bends almost all the way in half. I have to twist my body around. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lake. This is a St. Clair monster smallmouth. This is gotta be it. And I was like, but it's fighting kind of weird. And then I finally get it up. And it's like a 24-inch drum. It's just like this massive sheephead, and you just get so depressed. It just takes all the wind out of your sails because it was an awesome fish, and it was a great thing to catch. But you're in the middle of a bass tournament, so you're wasting my time and ruining my lures, and But it was,
getting my hopes up.
Yeah, it was a love-hate relationship in that moment because it was really cool to catch, but it was also come on, dude, get out of my way, looking for the smallies out here. So that was probably one of my more memorable ones. That and the catfish in South Carolina, those were pretty big too, but those are crazy too. I'm just going to tell this story real quick. So we were fishing a river bassin tournament in around Charlotte area, and I was on the river, and we decided to go below this dam, and because they weren't releasing the water from upriver, but it had rained the whole day before. So that section was high, but it wasn't flowing. The flow, you're still able to paddle through the flow. Whereas upriver, closer to the check-in, the water was all muddy and it was super fast. So just this one dam we saw wasn't releasing. So we hedged our bets and went below it to be a little bit safer. And early in the morning, sun's not even up yet, I paddle up to this a little bit of current coming off the edge of the dam. I'm pitching a chatterbait up there and working it back. Huge hit, crack. Try to bam, then it slips off. You're fighting it for a second and it slips off, and you're like, oh man, it's on. It is on, sort of feeling. Throw it back up there. Another smack. Pull it up. Finally get it up next to the boat. It's probably a 18, 20-inch catfish. And you're like, oh, come on. Really? This has got to be serious. I was so excited once you find a pile of catfish like that, you just got to leave. So I kind of move on, and it's probably another 25 minutes later, and I pitch up into this dam has cutout sections a rectangles that go back and forth, kind of like a zipper pattern almost. And I pitch up in there, and I get another hit, and this thing is just massive. I instantly knew it wasn't a bass, but I was like, this is big, so I want to get it in, sort of thing. And I land this catfish, Ryan, and unfortunately I don't have any pictures of it because there was some sort of snafu with my buddy who tried to take a picture of it, and then the picture wasn't there later. So this is really a fishtail, but I had fish grips in this catfish's mouth, and I'm 6'2". So I was standing up in my Coosa HD at the time, and I had the fish grips by my chin, and its tail was down like halfway down my thigh. Like this thing was over 30 inches long. Like it was a huge catfish. And so I later, I'd go away from there because I'm trying to bass fish. But then a couple hours later, I come back. Like I go down river a little bit, and I fish some others, and I come back, and I figured out what they were doing. Is these catfish were literally swimming the edge of that concrete that was a zipper, and they were going in it, and they were going across, and they were coming back out. But their antenna, their whisker, was touching that concrete the whole time. So they were using their whiskers to know where the edge of that dam was, and they were cruising the surface area of that dam. And then whenever they would come across a minnow or anything, they'd just open their mouth, eat it, and then keep moving on. So literally all I was doing was throwing my lure in front of these catfish that were basically circling these rocks all morning. But it was a really cool thing to see once the sun come up, was just watching these big catfish swim around this dam and just eat everything in sight. So that was another really cool fish that I was able to catch during a tournament that didn't help me during the tournament.
But earlier in the summer, I actually went out with a couple buddies, and we all, talked trash to one another, playfully and all that. But so we were trying to see who could catch the most bass, and we were actually at it was mine and another guy's first time at this place. It was another guy that like the third guy, he's been there several times. And so I was at one, the guy that had been there before, he was at one, and the other guy was at 0. So I'm trying to get that advantage on him, and I'm throwing a whopper plopper, and I cast out and I get a hit, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got my second fish. I reel it in. It's a bluegill.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
bluegill's getting aggressive there on those whopper ploppers, huh?
I'm telling you, all three of us ended up catching a bluegill that day on bass lures. 2 of us on a whopper plopper, and I think one caught one on a crankbait.
Jeez.
I don't know what causes them to be so aggressive out there. I don't know if they're just starving to death trying to eat whatever they can or what, but
yeah. No, the thing that made the least sense to me, that reminds me of a time that I was in Tennessee, and we were fishing for smallmouth, and right in the middle of a rapid, where they probably should be, but we were using whopper ploppers, and we were using Ned rigs, I guess make a little bit more sense. But the whopper ploppers blew my mind. We were catching rainbow trout on whopper plopper. And in Ned rigs, fishing them super fast through current, kind of trying to get the smallmouth to react or whatever. And each one of us, there was 4 of us on the river that day, and I think 3 out of the 4 of us at least caught a rainbow trout going for smallmouth, fishing with super reactive lures. So it was insane. It was a weird day for that.
Yeah, that is crazy. Man, those whopper ploppers will catch just about anything.
Yeah. It's a good lure, and that's something that I've always talked about with my friends up here. Is I just, so many people post online that they just can't get them to work, or they can't catch fish on them, and I just don't understand how they haven't. I just don't understand how they haven't.
I feel the same way. Jason Ricketts here on Paddle and Fin, he's the same way. He's like, I've never had luck on a whopper plopper. I'm like, that's the only top water bait I've ever had luck on is the whopper plopper. So I don't see it. You just cast and retrieve. But it's to me, it's more about, where you're casting at and, getting accurate casts than it is anything.
Yeah. I mean, if you're I will throw this piece of advice out there into the ether. If you're using a whopper plopper on moving water, at least in Ohio, it depends on what kind of river you're on, but in Ohio, a river is like a creek. So
yeah,
you have to throw that thing like you're going to lose it. You can't just throw it down. If you throw it down the middle of the river, you'll catch stuff every once in a while. But you got to throw that thing in the little pockets up by the roots and up by the little current breaks where there's fast water running past of it in a ditch or a turn or something like that. And that's where you're going to get your most strikes, is because basically what's happening is they're sitting in those pockets underneath that cover or in those roots or on those down trees or whatever. And if you put that bait right up against the bank or right up in that pocket and it lands, they look up at it and lands. These are fish that aren't used to seeing a lot of stuff when you're getting into float trips and like little creeks and stuff like that. So they notice it land and they're not afraid of it. And then when you start pulling it out and it starts doing that plop, you usually only get 1 or 2 plops out of it before it gets crushed, because they either don't like it and they don't want it to be around, or it's an easy target and it's free food for them. So like I throw that thing into the thickest stuff that most people would probably be so scared to throw a whopper plopper into. And, you know, I have lost them. I've had to like cut them off and cut 3 feet of, 3 to 15 feet of braid off before, because it was just too hard to get it back. But I've caught, it's really paid off doing that though. So you just really got to throw those in some bad areas. And it's funny because my one buddy is always like, I can't do that. I can't cast like you. Like, I don't understand how you cast like that. Like, apparently I cast a really weird way, and I have like, I'll literally one-handed with the bait caster, like flip a lure. Like I'll just like swing it around and I'll flip it in a backwards angle or forwards, like with one hand. I don't have to use both hands to like, fulcrum the back of the rod. And I've somehow, I guess, unknowingly developed a way where I can flip lures around back and forth with one hand in like to little pockets, like at weird angles, to adjust for not being able to adjust the boat very well in certain scenarios when there's, moving water or, stuff like that that's not going to allow you to use your anchors or your river sticks or your power poles or whatnot. So, but yes, back to the point of the tip is you got to throw those things. You can't be afraid of the cover and stuff. Like, worry about getting the fish on and then landing it later. Like, because if you don't ever get the fish on, you never have a chance to land it. So, try some of those harder to reach areas on those streams.
Well, see that now I might have to, try to live even more dangerous with it, because, I've never lost a whopper plopper from the kayak. I've lost a couple of fishing from the bank where I obviously couldn't get out and get to them, but from kayak, which, like I said earlier, I fish on an extreme budget. So if I can get that lure back, I'll get that lure back. I've been in some sticky situations trying to get it unstuck.
Don't you worry about that. I mean, like I have too. Like, it takes a lot for me to get to the point where I'm like, that lure's gone. Like, it's got to be pretty life risking for me to hop just to call it a day on one of those whopper ploppers, because at $12, $15, $16 a piece, they're not something
they're not cheap.
There's not something I like to let go very easily. So, I mean, I've totally been blown up spots, been like, I'm ruining this spot to get this lure back. Like, I'm going in there. So, yeah, I've put myself in some hairy situations before with that.
Well, what's your favorite size to throw?
It's really hard to, like, I don't like the 90s. I'm just going to say it. I don't like the 90s. I throw either the 75s or the 110s, and I go back and forth on which size I'm throwing for that, depending on what waterway I'm on. Like, if I'm on something like the Susquehanna, I'll throw a 110 or bigger. But if I'm something like back in Ohio, like some of the creeks and rivers I like to fish in, like the Columbus area or whatever, like I'll drop down to the 75, because it's a smaller profile, so it'll fit into those tighter corners that I'm talking about a bit easier without getting tangled up as much, because it's smaller. And then that way, that belly drops on the 75 really presents a better hookup for smallmouth, because the smallmouth always are gonna eat head first. Most fish have adapted to eat head first, so that front hook is the one that's more important. And the way that belly sits down, it puts the hook in a better hookup ratio, in my opinion, than the 90, where it sits up flat and pushes farther back in the profile of the bait.
Okay. Yeah, see, I started out throwing the 90, and I had some success with it, but I'm kind of like you. I'm not too big on the 90. I really like the 110,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to like the 75. Like in my head, they should be awesome. I haven't really had any luck on the 75. I've gotten like a couple hits, but they no hookups on it. But to be fair, I haven't thrown it a whole lot. I've
Yeah.
tried it here and there. I only have one of them, and it's in a bluegill pattern. And by the time I got it, we were kind of later in the summer where bluegill probably, bluegill pattern probably ain't ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I throw two. I'll tell you, I throw two patterns with the whopper floppers. I throw loon and perch. Those are literally, if I don't have a perch, I'll throw like a sexy shad, like the one with the bright green stripe. Like those are the three colors that I throw. I don't get into anything else. I don't throw monkey butt. I don't get like the red crawl. Like I literally go white or black is basically what I do for top water presentation with the whopper floppers. I don't. If the shadow's throwing it off, I think it's only, personally, I think it's like a 25-30% chance that the color scheme is making them not attack it. It's the water disturbance in the way that the noise that it's making, and then the water it's disturbing is what it's attracting them. And then that last 30% when they're coming towards it is going to decide whether they whiff it or absolutely smash it. And that's the difference, is whether it's white or black. And that has a lot to do with whether it's sunny or cloudy out, in my opinion, at least for smallmouth on the rivers and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say what I've had the most success on is powder, which is pretty similar to sexy shad. It's like
powder
white
bone,
with like blue eyes.
Yeah, powder and bone, or powder, bone, perch. Like those are all kind of sexy shad. Those are all kind of like the same color to me. If it's white on the belly, then it's white. That's what they see. You know, like so. I know sometimes they do roll a little bit, so you might be able to see some of the side pattern, but that's for the most part, in my opinion, it's really just white and black for the top water stuff, or for white ploppers anyway.
All right, cool. Well, hey man, I think I'm gonna start wrapping it up. And unless is there anything else you want to touch on before we start wrapping it up?
Nothing specifically, unless you have any other questions for me in any special direction you want to go.
Oh man, I feel like it's been a pretty good talk with some good info in there. And think of some more questions. Maybe we can come back on sometime.
Yeah, for sure, no problem at all. Just shoot me a message. I will just say, obviously you guys got the whole paddle and fin thing going on. That's awesome. You got all the different segments to listen to that. If you want to get some more, higher tier, I guess, knowledge, definitely check us out over at the Hooked on Wild Waters podcast. Drew is an amazing fisherman. He just has that instinct, and there's a lot of secrets hidden in those stories and that stuff that we joke around about and that we talk about, and there's a lot of good information in it if you just listen to us. So there's stuff that I've noticed myself, like, and this is a true statement, is like I'll talk to Drew and he'll tell those stories, and literally 4 days later when I go fishing, that exact scenario plays out. Like what we just talked about was something that exactly happened, and it didn't click in my brain until I remember that he just said it 3 days ago, and I'm like, why didn't I ever think of this before, sort of thing. So I mean, I follow, being like running the river bassin thing, like that was one of the things that I followed, like learning how to river fish, was a lot of stuff that he did. So the information that we're putting out there is really, really good stuff. So if you need to get past me and my skill set at this point, and you need a little bit more higher tier stuff, definitely listen to that podcast.
Yeah, I actually really like that podcast. Like, I think you two do a really good job on that.
I appreciate it.
Y'all just need to come out with more episodes.
I do. I'm trying. It's really tough, with his schedule and mine, trying to line stuff up. But we're trying to get it all sorted out, and we're really trying to get to an episode every 2 weeks. We're running behind a week right now, so I'm going to text him tomorrow and see if we can get the next one scheduled up. So that's a little inside information for you, which is probably pointless by the time we get this podcast out. But yeah, I think we're really going to try to tighten some stuff down, and we got some stuff in the works for over the winter time and some future stuff we want to work on. So if it all pans out, it'll be some really cool stuff that we have planned for you guys in the future for our end of stuff. But
well, sweet, man. Look forward to it. Um, you want to shout out like some sponsors and social media where people can follow you and all that good stuff?
yeah, you know, my big thanks is to Jackson Kayak. I wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff without ever running into their company and then now having their support, putting me in high quality kayaks. So huge thanks to them. Aaron Steiger and Eric Jackson himself and Drew and Jameson and all those guys that over the past however many years have made it is what it is today. It's a really cool part to be a part of. If you're in the area, if you're listening and you're in the Northeast Ohio area, or you're in Pennsylvania or Southern Indiana or our areas like that, check out Kayak Anglers. It's a human powered grassroots trail charity event. Every event goes to a charity of some degree, so it's definitely giving back to the community, and it's a lot of fun. I did a lot of my learning and stuff like that in that fishing trail. So if you're interested in the tournament stuff, hit me up. I'll answer any of your questions if you want to be a part of it or check them out. Let me know about that. And then other than that, thanks to everybody who's supported me along the way. I don't have a lot of sponsors. Basically Jackson's the only thing I'm affiliated with at the moment, other than Hooked on Wild Waters with Drew, and that's just helping him with the podcast. So, this True Talk earlier, I was saying to you, like the economical fishing sort of approach is where I'm still at this point. So, that's pretty much it. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at lipripper_RVT. And then you can just find me at Ken Morris on Facebook. And that's pretty much the two predominant areas that I do anything on. So social media wise.
Yeah. And you shared that article that we were talking about earlier on your Facebook page.
I did.
So,
yeah.
If people were interested in checking that out, they can find you on Facebook. And Ken, appreciate you coming on again and everything. And everybody, tight lines and smooth paddling.